Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Stephen Runge, and I'm the director of the School of Art. It's wonderful to see so many of you here at this evening's event, Exchange as a Symmetrical Gesture, celebrating the culmination of the School of Art Gallery's Visiting Curator Program. I joined the School of Art as a director this past summer, so I have the privilege of speaking tonight not only as someone new to this community, but also with great appreciation for the work that made this program possible. Originally proposed and generously funded by Dr. Michael Nesbitt, a longtime supporter of the arts in Winnipeg and at the University of Manitoba, the program was launched in 2021. Three remarkable curators, Grace Devaney, and emerging curators Lillian O'Brien-Davis and Shalaka Jadhav, took up the challenge to develop exhibitions, publications, and public programs with the goal of expanding how contemporary art is discussed and experienced in the prairies. Over the past 3 years, their projects have offered students, faculty, and audiences the opportunity to engage with new ideas and perspectives shaping the field today. I want to take a moment to express my deep and sincere thanks, first to former gallery director Blair Fornwald and to former School of Art director Dr. Edward Jerkowski, whose leadership and vision brought this ambitious program to life. Before we begin this evening's proceedings, I want also to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuak, Assinininewak, Dakota Oyate, Dene, and Inuit, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. The University of Manitoba recognizes that the treaties signed on these lands are a lifelong enduring relationship, and we are dedicated to upholding their spirit and intent. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and the present. With this understanding, we commit to support Indigenous excellence through active reconciliation, meaningful change, and the creation of an environment where everyone can thrive. Our collaboration with Indigenous communities is grounded in respect and reciprocity, and this guides how we move forward as an institution. Tonight's event, Exchange as a Symmetrical Gesture, brings together many of the voices and ideas that defined the program. We'll begin with a reading by artist Erica De Freitas, followed by a curatorial conversation with Grace, Lillian, and Shalaka, moderated by writer and artist Nick Wilson. To start, please welcome Erica De Freitas, a returning artist whose work was featured in the program's second exhibition, The Performance of Shadows, curated by Lillian O'Brien-Davis in spring 2023. Erica's interdisciplinary practice includes performance, photography, video, installation, textiles, drawing, and writing. Placing emphasis on gesture, process, the body, documentation, and paranormal phenomena, she mines concepts of loss, post-memory, legacy, and objecthood. Her work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, and she holds a Master of Visual Studies from the University of Toronto. Join me in welcoming Erica to the stage.
Good evening. So I'd like to thank Lillian O'Brien-Davis for inviting me to exhibit my work with two wonderful artists that I've admired for many, many years, Betty Starr and Tim Whiten. Blair Fornwald for consistently championing artistic and curatorial visions. And Dr. Michael Nesbitt for the generous donation towards the Visiting Curatorial Project, providing the opportunity for this wonderful experience to happen. I'd also like to thank Dr. Stephen Runge and Shannon Relke for welcoming us to our time here in Winnipeg. Thank you all of you for being here and for those of you watching from afar. Score number 24, After Scotch Blue. Before dawn, make an exchange. My response to this score is a reflection of how effortless it once was for her and I to meet, to see each other, and to know. At the moment of writing this response to this score, the sense of knowing felt very faint. I engaged in an exchange with her this morning at a time just before meeting the light. A time when my breathing felt easy and my inner self grounded in what was. This grounding has been fleeting, and yet this is the time when we meet. There were days and days and days when these exchanges occurred, casually without conscious intention, or so I thought. Now my mind is restless and thoughts weighted. I'm in the thick of a spiritual awakening, a time just before meeting my light. I'm told it's all in the breath, the breathing, which I guess makes sense since breathing, it's a reminder of it all, of what is. But I don't know how to measure touch for it to matter anymore. This is but an open call for perspective. See? I'm in the thick of a spiritual awakening. Years ago, in hushed tones, her and I met through an understanding. Sometimes I can hear her clearly, knowing that she stands close so that no words get lost in the spaces between. Her voice is discernible from the others as each one's voice aligns in a different color. Hers, a primrose yellow. This morning, when she spoke, the hum in her voice circulated in my chest and settled in this chamber right here where I'm pointing to. And I suppose the deposits of imperial purple, ultramarine blue, and verdigris green, and a yellowish white were dotted within. A banded gemstone, a fluorite sliced. As you and I have now been involved in an exchange, you may point to the area of your chest where you hear me and where you propose I may pause. I've been thinking about exchange as a symmetrical gesture, a movement, an action, or an expression. It involves the sharing of one thing for another, something of resonance. Is an illuminated willingness to bear an unrestrained curiosity enough? It is not an exchange if nothing is given in return, so I attend. This is now where I share with you a way that you may attend. The assurance of her presence has been a learning. When open and even, there is a kindness. Reconsider relation to and release difference of if in doubt when in deep. A slight sweetness. Suppose that the many little splinters come from the moon. Surround yourself with chrysanthemums, lavender, and a considerable comfort in the unknown. And remember to breathe. Remarkably, it can be easy to forget when one broadens their wishes, and it requires effort to articulate one's needs. Yes, breathe. To be open is to reflect on the composition of space and time and the temporality of this. It takes practice. Understand that to be with past and future selves has nothing to do with the singleness of meaning, but much to do with the consistency of presence over a multiplicity of planes. To be balanced is to be centered from where you choose to stand. To see beyond the veil they've placed before us is to be wise to the monotony of institutionalized brilliance. To have grace is to embrace the certainty of uncertainty and of unknowing, yet learning through sensing the essence of this. So after some time, I returned to writing after an experience was had. This morning when I leaned into her, my footing was faint, the birds devoted, and I found a likeness in flight. Assured we saw each other plainly, the nervous chatter of reason and demand reduced to a soft politeness. The subtle pleasure in being still, and all I needed to do was to allow myself to be. Could it be that it is all so simple? An exchange is an invitation accepted? Nothing ever so sure. Score number 27, after China Blue. Choose a point, start in the thick, amending. So I invite you to choose a point with me. A fractured branch, a cobalt blue, a rusted coin, a halo round, a colored glass, an honest line, a crooked vein, a strand of hair, a brittle nail, a blackened sky, a concrete fold, a blade of grass, a pickled rose. A mirrored grief, A crumb that lies, a golden cloud, a bewildered crowd, an exquisite pocket, a weeping statue, a prophetic scene, a trick of light, a holy card, a vanishing sea, a punctured photograph, a cowrie shell, a porcelain pilgrim, an erratic boundary, a woven language, a tangled morning, a hallowed shroud, an erratic sun, a dissolving spring, an eclipsed tradition, a miraculous hymn, a doting mark, an opal button, a drowning dirge, a healing trait, a ballooning vision, a crisp white shirt, a skeptic ivory, a salted caution, a grinning statement, an obliging handkerchief, a swollen pitch, an engrossing mist, an ancestral flint, a sublime imprint, a rooted tome, an admired indifference, a distilled rhyme, a gathered symphony, an absorbing regret, a gurgled response, a braided amber, a melancholic thread, a relished incline, a fragmented chance, a spared feather, an accidental ritual, a waxed bell, a bitter foliage, a scuffed elbow, a stitched prose, a bronze complexion, a recited crystal, a channeling amethyst, a tender stage, a knotted readiness. And now to start in the thick. I don't know that what I'm seeking is an object that could potentially sit on the palm of my hand or slip between the seams along the collar. I don't think it's a thing, the second thing being italicized. If it were a thing, wouldn't I have come upon it by now? Wouldn't I have seen it glow and hear it speak to me in languages unknown until what is said is felt? You know? Felt in that area of your body where, you can't consistently map because its location is unpredictable. It wanders and catches you off guard, all the more alerting you to its presence. It's particular, likely without a name or a way of being categorized because it's one of those things that can't be defined. Well, not in the way that fits within the parameters of systems and structures here in the West. Is that what I'm looking for, that feeling? Yes and no. It's a feeling of reassurance that you didn't even know you were craving. It's one that I hope my ancestors intuited and I inherited so that I can impart through lingering. No, not lingering, but like this feeling in my chest, it's warm and collective. Being. The words are escaping me, but I'm thinking of you at this moment. I'm looking for that thing that I'm too afraid to name because maybe by naming it, it no longer becomes an ever-present presence. Is the word imminent or omnipresent? I think it's a combination of the two, and is there a word for that? I don't know. I'm sure there are cultures that have a word or a sound or a sign or a gesture that honors this thing that is unknown, for this one specific feeling that accompanies consciousness. This is not a thing, no. It's a state of being and feeling and knowing with certainty that there is more to what we choose to see and what is chosen to be shown to us. There is that which transcends the surface. That provides a depth beyond what is visible in the most beautiful ways, and it connects us. It is profound, it's exciting, it's liberating, it's here. If we choose to open, if we are able to be open, I don't know. Okay, I can be with this, this whatever it is that's happening inside of me. But I guess I'm avoiding what should be said. I'm afraid of losing it upon finding it again. And again, and again, and again, and again. Amending. So not included in our text. This is a score, a new score, Score number 14-06-25, afterwards, let it be easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Our moderator for this evening, Nick Wilson, is an artist born in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and an alumnus of my previous institution, Mount Allison University, where they graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. They also hold a Master of Fine Arts from the University of Regina. Nick has shown work across Canada and internationally. Working across media, they create videos, texts, performances, and artist books. Their work often engages time, queer lineage, decay, and the distance between art practice and literature. Grace Devaney, curator of Open Structure, is a curator and art historian who holds a PhD in art history from Northwestern University. She is the David C. and Sarah Jean Ruttenberg Associate Curator of Photography and Media at the Art Institute of Chicago. Lillian O'Brien Davis, curator of the Performance of Shadows, is the Associate Curator at the Mackenzie Art Gallery. She previously held the position of Curator of Collections and Contemporary Art Engagement at the Goldfarb Gallery of York University. Shalaka Jadhav, curator of To Broadcast is to Scatter, is a writer, researcher, and curator who spent their childhood between cities in India and in Dubai and now lives in Kitchener, Ontario. They hold a fellowship through the Musegets Foundation to explore experimental publication in the Waterloo-Wellington corridor and are a founding member of Dirty Work Studio, Waterloo Region's first community risograph print studio. Please join me in welcoming Grace, Lillian, Shalaka, and Nick.
Thanks, Stephen. Good place to start. So thanks for being here, everyone. I'm quite excited to talk to these three curators. I have kind of like evolving relationships with all of them, and I wrote for the Open Structure publication. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about some ongoing ideas. Thank you. And I wanted to start by asking how the work that you've done in this mentorship, particularly the exhibitions, Open Structure, To Broadcast is to Scatter, and Performance of Shadows, how they are sitting with you now.
I guess I'll start. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us back here in Winnipeg. And how the exhibition sits now is an interesting question, because I often feel like with contemporary art curating, it's sort of you do one thing and then you're on to the next and on to the next. And so it's been really wonderful to have this opportunity to reflect on a show that I think its genesis really came from some reading and thinking I was doing in 2021, and then it opened in 22, and so much has changed since then. So I guess to answer your question, I think that at the core of that exhibition, I was really interested in the ways that visual art and the senses in general, touch, sound, all of these tactile things create space for people to connect and to dream together and plan and sort of imagine otherwise, and how after the pandemic there was this real desire, I think, on my part and others to kind of find those places for connection. So I think that that kind of central nature and tactility of the exhibition is something that I still feel we're all kind of finding our way back to, and it continues to be something I think about a lot, and how art kind of is able to create these like really kind of concrete and quite literal spaces for connection.
think for me, the way the exhibition has sort of been sitting with me, mine's a lot more recent. It was just in 2023. I guess I've just been thinking a lot about the ways in which the artists bring together conversations of time. And a lot of the thesis of the show was thinking about time as rhizomatic, if we could take that up as a way of thinking. And I think in this moment, maybe we're all looking for a little bit of that rhizomatic thinking around time, just moving through a reality that feels cruel on a good day even. So I think in the sense that the artists have opened up that space to think about that, that's something I'm really grateful for. Because the show looked very different, similarly because there was so much time between devising it and conceiving it. I'm really grateful for the way that the artists opened up that space for that question to emerge.
I've this residency when we interviewed for it in, was that 2021? We were, sorry, is this an okay distance? You can hear me? Oh, thanks. When we did the interviews in 2021 with you, Grace, and Blair, I had this seed of an idea that got to become an exhibition with support of this funding and with the support of Blair and the School of Art Gallery. And it was one of the first opportunities as a young curator where I could have my idea come to life in conversation with the artists I was specifically interested in working with. And so it was a real opportunity to build my confidence and see that my idea could come to life and make sense and people would respond to it. And so now having, almost 5 years pass and have the exhibition in the rear view, I think I use it a lot as a reminder about all of the things that I was interested in at the outset around intuition, around how there are different forms of knowledge that we hold in our bodies and how they all are important and significant to pay attention to, and that when I'm doing my projects now, I can look back to this project and remind myself that that's an important part of my thinking and my curatorial value system, if you will. So I feel like the project sits with me now as sort of a precious stone or something that I hold dear, that it came to life and mattered.
So something that we were talking about in the run-up to this talk was the way that so much of the work in the exhibitions worked as a sort of, like the title says, a reciprocal gesture. And I'm wondering how the experience of a mentorship is about exchange. It's often thought of as a kind of hierarchical structure, and I'm just curious to know how the framing of a mentorship kind of influenced the work that the three of you did together.
Well, I think we started out the relationship, the three of us, where we didn't know each other, and we were sort of, okay, what would you like? What do you want to see? And we had grand designs over we'll share readings and we'll have this really formalized rhythm. And because of the nature of all of our work, that immediately wasn't feasible. And so I think it hit this really nice rhythm that I think suited all of us really well, based off of the fact that we're still enjoying being in touch with each other, but where it really became about conversation, and the word we would use a lot, sort of in good humor, was a debrief. So okay, what did you think of that? Okay, well, what about this? And just kind of getting to process together, which it's great having Grace's perspective coming in as a more accomplished curator who has a different perspective also from the United States. But then also, I think, like sharing our ideas and getting Shalaka's reactions or feedback on things that I was thinking about, and vice versa. Like it immediately became sort of more conversational than anything else, which is my favorite kind of relationship.
Yeah, I feel like, so my training is both as an urban planner and as a curator, and I think training as an urban planner, there's a lot of formality and structure, and it's a professionalized degree, and so you're supposed to have a mentor, and there's like this very stringent relationship that's often expected. And I can say that that wasn't necessarily what happened here, because I think I don't know, maybe it's not, like, I don't want to speak for both of you, but I feel like we all kind of like let our guard down a little bit. Like it didn't feel as hierarchical, because we were just excited to learn from one another and how different our work was and continues to be. I would also say, and Nick, you and I talked about this a little bit, working independently, I was just excited to have colleagues, because it can be tricky and an exercise of just sort of circling around in your mind palace a little bit, and so I'm just really grateful for that space. I don't know if it's not in the spirit of conversation, but I want to read a quote. This is a quote that I have like on a notes app on my computer, because I come back to it a lot. It's from The Undercommons by Fred Moten and Stefano Harney, and they talk about the way that they use the term study. So I'll go ahead and read it. When I think about the way we were using the term study, I think we're committed to the idea that study is what you do with other people. It's talking and walking around with other people, working, dancing, suffering, some irreducible convergence of all three, held under the name of speculative practice. And I think we were all maybe prescribed to that, just in the methodology of how this unraveled. And I'm really grateful for that, especially in the way that this program was structured, in the sense that we got to kind of bop between different cities and see the way that we see cities that we live in or are producing work in. And just, I think for me, seeing how place produces each of your practices and vice versa was something I think about a lot.
Yeah, I think that the length of this residency allowed us to see each other in different contexts and to travel together. We spent a lot of time walking and in cars and by bodies of water, and just, yeah, I think that the definition of study that you offered was just really fitting for what we got to do. That was really special. And I'll say that, I think being put in the position of mentor is an incredible honor, and one that, comes with a bit of time travel a little bit, right? Because you have to think back to other moments in your career or in your experience and then try to offer those up. But then I think the delightful thing for me was that I got to learn so much from both of you. I remember, I think it was during our first conversation, Shalaka, asking you about this transition from urban planning to curating, and one of the things you said that has stuck with me now for 4 years is that you were interested in making the pivot because in your previous field, it was often about having the answer to a question, and you were interested in entering into a space where sitting with the questions, creating the questions, kind of playing with the ideas, even when they're quite serious, was like the kind of the business we were in. And I remember that just like feeling like such a joyful perspective on something that I had been doing for a long time, and was feeling kind of maybe not quite cynical, just slightly off from cynical.
Outside of it, yeah.
Slightly to the side of cynical, and then just realizing with that it was going to just kind of breathe new life to be looking at things again. And then Lily and I remember like your ambitions for your show, and just having this idea that was so clear and so, a constellation of artists I had never heard of connecting. Obviously, I was familiar with Betty Saar, but the other two was just an introduction for me. So, just like along the way, it's just been peppered with like so much, I think, learning on all of our parts. It's been really just wonderful.
One of the things that I think goes across multiple practices on the stage is working with artists multiple times and having ongoing relationships with artists. And I'm interested in how, as a curator, artists, or how your relationships with artists develop, and how those relationships impact your practice.
I can start this one. I'm actually the exception, I think, between the both of you, because this was my first time working with all of the artists. But I think so I'm like, can I answer this still? Am I still allowed, and if I'm the exception? But I think since working on To Broadcast Is to Scatter, I think I've started to pay attention to the value in sort of revisiting relationships and collaborations. I think it's seeded a lot of, just to like take a step back and like try to open up what my brain looks like. I don't know how everyone in the audience takes notes. I remember learning how to take notes in a really linear fashion on lined paper. And one day before an exam in undergrad, I forgot to study for something and decided to just draw a mind map of everything I remembered, and then just fill in the gaps with like connections, and did great and realized that that's how my brain works and not linear lined paper. And I share that story because I think for me, this being the first time working with the artists in the show, it helped me start a map, in a sense, of sort of trails of questions and themes that I was interested in to continue to learn about, and that sort of fostered different connections and revisitations of collaborations. And I just want to say also on the sort of previous conversation around mentorship, I also have just learned from all of you, yourself too, Nick, just how to be a better colleague, which I think is just really important to say, especially working in the arts, around just someone just leaning into being relational and generous and patient. I think that's something that, has really come out of this and really shaped the way that I want to approach my work moving forward.
Yeah, I love the sort of description of how you learn, and it made me think, like, I hate Q&A like settings where, as an audience member, when I'm trying to think of something smart to ask, and then as a person on stage trying to answer it in an intelligent way. And I think it's because I need more time to like formulate any kind of like thought, and so this sort of rapid fire, and so like I find studio visits can be like intimidating sometimes, or like not as much studio visits, but like, when you're in this sort of rapid fire, like if anyone here is a grad student, understand in like a crit setting, that sort of like quick response, I don't excel in those situations. And so to kind of segue into your question, like this, like any opportunity to have sort of like a more enduring like relationship is great, because I feel like then it's like, okay, the thing that I was really interested in, I finally, after 4 years, have like formulated my question for you, or like I've have sort of like a more in-depth understanding of stuff that you're working on, and you get a few more like chances. And so to be more specific, Erica, who you just heard from, who is, I think, one of the most special, talented, just important artists of our time. I met her when I was in grad school, and I reached out to her for one of my first studio visits, and we went for lunch, and we just chatted, and she paid for lunch, which was so generous, and it was a gesture. it was a gesture that sort of opened up this opportunity for like ongoing symmetrical gestures, of trying to reciprocate back and forth. She was in my thesis exhibition, and then we stayed in touch when I moved out of town, and we exchanged postcards during the pandemic, and I ended up writing about Erica's work, and so for a publication. And so she was just on my mind, as a friend, and as an artist who I admired, who was doing amazing work. And so she was in my mind, and then like the other artists in the exhibition, Tim Whiten and Betty Saar, I had never worked with before, but Betty's work had been sort of in my like orbit for a long time. She's one of those artists that you learn about if you study art history, and you learn about sort of like the liberation of Aunt Jemima, and that's it. So that piqued my interest, and I got to know her work a little bit more. But it was through Erica that sort of like the rest of the show grew, and it was because we had this sustained conversation across a friendship, across time, that allowed me to sort of get all of my ideas in order to have that kind of clear sense of what I wanted to do for this program. And I just want to share, and I always cry when I talk about Tim, but I'm not going to, is that Tim is someone who I reached out to him, it might have even been 2020, and we emailed a little bit, and then I was in Toronto, and I had the opportunity to meet him in his studio, and he has a background in psychoanalysis, and so his studio is like, it's very sparse, and so there's like one chair, a coffee table, and then his chair, and so you're seated sort of there, and he just asked me, he interviewed me for like an hour and sort of sent me on my way, and then I wrote to him, and I sent him like a proposal for an exhibition. He didn't like it. He sent me feedback, and he doesn't do email, so we'd speak on the phone, and I email him again. He'd call me back. And I was overwhelmed by the generosity that he offered, in the kind of depth of his willingness to work with me. At that time, being a curatorial assistant who was like trying to do her basically her first show. And so we've only worked together on one show, but I think in that same sort of spirit of like a reoccurring and deepening relationship, like I've been really lucky to have that proximity to him, and it's allowed me to get to know his work better. And so the show that was at the School of Art Gallery toured to the Art Museum at the University of Toronto the following year, and so also having had this pre-established relationship with Tim and Erica, it allowed that second iteration to really I feel like it had a bit more confidence, because we knew each other well, there was trust, and it just like everything had it's like a stew or something. Like everything had a chance to simmer a bit longer. Anyway, maybe I'm going on a little too long, so I won't talk about Betty as in depth, but I think my relationship with her is at a distance. I've never met her, but I traveled to LA as part of my research for this exhibition, and sort of Erica was just in Lourdes, and so I sort of like did the stations of Betty Saar through LA, and sort of visited all of these significant locations in her career, and sort of like got to know her through her town and her work, and so I think that was my attempt at sort of like building that relationship. But she, for those who don't know, she's like 98. She may even actually be 100 at the in 2026 she'll be 100. So it's very it's not as easy to access her in person, but that was the sort of goal, to make sure with each of the artists that there was this sort of like deeper relationship that I think allowed the show to kind of have a more a sensitive read on the works and on the concepts.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna say, there's something about these chairs that's making me feel really stiff, so I'm trying to loosen up a little. But I was just gonna say that your approach reminds me so much of the way that I tend to my garden, where like every season you're kind of paying attention to how things have shifted or clumped together or like died off. And I don't know, I'm just thinking about what you said about curatorial values and intuition being one that you're trying to cultivate. And I don't know, this garden image is coming to mind, so I just want to share it with you.
Thank you.
This is another nature metaphor for, I think, the working with the same people. But I remember an early studio visit I had with an artist, and I don't know if this person meant this as a good thing or a bad thing, but he was like, "You curators are all like squirrels. You're just like gathering nuts and things and kind of squirreling them away for like, whatever you do." And I remember being sort of baffled by what felt like an accusation at the time, but I do think that there is something to, I think maybe it stuck with me, and then that idea of like you have all these incredible conversations with people. That's like, I think, one of my favorite parts of the job, whether it's colleagues like this or in studio visits, and you're learning from people all the time. And then exhibitions are opportunities to present the ideas that have emerged and the things you've learned and seen to others, and then like hopefully kind of proliferate that, to use maybe another gardening metaphor. So I think for me, this show, there were a handful of people that I had been thinking with during the pandemic, which I spent in New Orleans, and that's where I got to know, since it's up, Ron Boucher, whose drawings are on view there, and Whit Forrester, who made the Gold Circle. We had been living in Chicago and then happened to move to New Orleans at the same time, and we had lived 2 blocks away from each other in Chicago and then ended up 3 blocks away from each other in New Orleans. So there was this kind of kismet to that relationship. But I think that's all to say that a lot of the artists in Open Structure were people that I had been thinking through and with for a long time in another context. And then I think the kind of magic of the exhibition was coming to Winnipeg, thinking through the exhibition I wanted to make, and being reminded of these various artists for different reasons once coming here. And like it kind of, it felt, Open Structure felt like hosting like a dream party where I got to invite all of these artists I'd been thinking with and through to a new context.
I love that metaphor of hosting. And I think that like there sometimes is this question about like what do curators do, and this slightly I don't know, like a slight curiosity about what that role is. And I'm kind of wondering in this moment what you see your role as a curator being to an exhibition, to artworks, to artists, to an audience. Like, where do you kind of locate yourself in that ecology?
Whoa. I'm like tempted to continue using this garden metaphor, but it feels clunky. But maybe I'll paint the picture, and maybe I'll go somewhere else with it. But I'm just thinking about this season in particular for me, where there's like rhythms to gardening. You have this like ideal vision of what you'd like for it to look like, or what flowers you'd like, or what vegetables you want to experiment with this year. And so you amend the soil so that it gets there, and then you start the seeds. And I think that's kind of like the research phase, right? And then you kind of put it into the ground, whether that's the studio visits or conversations with colleagues, or going out and seeing brilliant work and just feeling excited about that. And then there's like all the material parts of it that take a lot of patience and time, and and labor from lots of people who are behind the scenes. And I think part of the reason I'm like painting this picture is because I think something that I've really struggled with in curatorial practice is just how many hands touch all these works and all these processes that just either are kind of like in the back of the book of the credits, or you know, wherever they may lie. Because through this process, like the show never felt like I don't know, I felt really uncomfortable with like curatorial authority on it. It was really shaped by so many conversations and hands. So I don't know, like maybe the garden pictures here, I'm like uncomfortable with the like solo authority. And then if there's like a word to use, like maybe it's just like braiding these together. And maybe the like feeling is like sitting in the grass with your friends at a picnic and like braiding like a little patch of grass together and then kind of stepping away and dusting the picnic blanket off and then just noticing an imprint. These are like the four clunky images, but that's kind of how I've arrived at this stage of my practice. And I'm curious about how that imprint or that braided grass unravels or stays, or what comes next. Yeah, that's what I'll offer.
I can go next. You look ready.
Yeah, I love that, like, such a tranquil picture you painted, and I'm like, take me there.
It's like way more chill than I feel like it
I was gonna be
often
like,
is.
email.
One of the funny things that's happened through, I mean, we've been very lucky to travel through this program, and I feel like every time we eat, I just like over-describe the food that we're
I
eating.
love it, yeah.
I feel like I just did that with that response too. It's like a good insight to our.
Yeah, well, I was already thinking we should have included some of the travel pics, because I think going to see Prospect and see Grace's work was like, you know, part like to answer your question, I think like getting to see like you working on another curatorial project where like getting to see how you land there, and going to like such a kind of like heavy and like emotionally saturated place as like New Orleans was, I think, also like just informative, like just to be there. And you know, we went to Regina, which was lots of fun, and then Winnipeg as well. But for me, like I sort of love hearing other curators describe like kind of a methodology, because for me it's always like shows first, like go see a bunch of shows, and then you're kind of like you just like sit in it. And I find that's like seeing work is the only way that I ever like have any questions. And so, yeah, like, you know, being in conversation with Erica and getting to see her work and sort of that triggering a little itch, or, you know, seeing Betty's work. And then what I find now that like more time is passing and I'm evolving in my career is like, then I keep seeing it. It's like when you notice like a color and then you keep noticing it everywhere you go. I did a residency at the Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland maybe a year ago. And so the David Driscoll Center, he was an artist who kind of like, his father was a pastor, and so he sort of treated his archive the way his father treated like his sermon writing. So there's this sort of a very methodical, very kind of reverent accumulation of material about Black artists who were active along the East Coast of the United States. And so it's an amazing archive, so brilliant, and sort of just like reading about artists like Lois Mailloux Jones and Augusta Savage, and David Driscoll as well. But he had some Betty Saar files, which I was like, I know she's West Coast, but if there's any chance. And there was like a letter because she knew David, and so they like corresponded. And so he had lovingly saved their correspondence. And so, he had written her, okay, here's some exhibitions that you should check out next in your town, like business, all business. And she wrote him back and was just like, here's all the vegetables that are in my garden right now. The zucchini is looking really good. And I loved it so much because I got to see her again, and was sort of like getting all weepy, like kind of seeing her through her writing in this unexpected archive on the other side of the country. But it also, like, it reminded me of a thing that I really appreciate when artists do, and curators, like, and what creatives do, is like, they just sort of like interrupt the rhythm, or like interrupt the expectation, and sort of remind you of what's interesting, which is never kind of the thing that you're focusing on. And I think like what I'm learning as a curator is like to just stay open and attuned to that. Like just like zag if everyone else is zigging. And so like I think that's sort of where I'm at now is being kind of sort of just trying to not anticipate that, but just to kind of as those opportunities come up, to accept them and embrace them.
I love all of these approaches, and I think I will offer that one that is maybe a totally different one in addition to these, which I think are great and I rely on from time to time. But I think a lot of my curatorial practice has developed from a belief in an investment in museums and exhibition spaces as informal learning environments, which is something I think I maybe said that phrase earlier. And perhaps this is in part informed by like my like academic background too, and my interest in art history, that I think that a lot of times when I'm thinking about curating, it's the cultivating a garden, it's all the emails, but it's also an offering of something that people can kind of think through and think about the world with, and it becomes a third thing for other people. Like I remember when I was in graduate school, and there was the kind of, it's a false binary, but it felt like there was a path between choosing to go into academia and teach or curating. And I remember saying to somebody that I liked the idea of working in museums and working as a curator, because I like the idea that somebody could be, kind of visiting with their parent or out on a date or in a kind of social setting, but having an exhibition be a kind of third thing that brings people together is something that I feel really grateful to be a part of and facilitate. And I think about that kind of opportunity and responsibility a lot when I think about what like a core value for curatorial work is for me.
Yeah. I suppose like Lillian, I wanted to ask you about the performance of shadows traveled to the Art Museum at the University of Toronto, and I'm interested to hear about how an exhibition shifts across different venues, and how you like negotiate where you were when you can see the exhibition versus what you learned from an install, and then what you bring to it in a new space.
Yeah. Well, initially I brought the project to this residency because of and because I'm on stage, I'm not going to remember the Hamilton archives that are here on campus. And I was really interested in this sort of like very like localized history around like seances, and this sort of the way that underrepresented communities sort of like seek out channels of empowerment that are sort of like through these channels that may be considered non-traditional or unusual, or magical, if you will, like that kind of language loosely. And so I was sort of thinking that I would engage that archive as part of the exhibition, and then that really fell away from the project because there's a great professor on campus who was activating it in a different way, so it didn't make sense to sort of draw on that resource. And also because I think the show sort of started growing in another direction, um, primarily because of Tim, because he is so adamant about how his work should be framed, and I think he doesn't like to limit it, like in terms of saying like, oh, it's related to it's related to this sort of like a sensory, extrasensory perception or something like that, that could be tied into his work just directly. And so it was like, okay, how do we expand this out? And so the way that it got to live here in Winnipeg was kind of like through this sort of like birth process. Like it was sort of like in this really, it was in this like much, it was much more raw, I think, because it was sort of like changing shape very quickly. Betty Saar, there's essentially no Betty Saar work in Canada. So another sort of like practical benefit of this mentorship was that Grace was actually able to introduce me to a university gallery in the United States that had a Betty Saar work in their collection that they were willing to loan us. So like, just thanks, Grace. Like the show couldn't have come together. It's a 3-person show. One person I couldn't access, so there was some tension there. But yeah, so it sort of was in this sort of growth period, and so I was really happy with it. But there was just like a lot of logistics to work through, and so when Barbara Fisher, the director at the Art Museum, reached out and was sort of like, can we make this happen? It was really quick. Like it was like, there's this opportunity, would you like to do it? And I was like, yes, please. And so, I think like the show had closed, the work had been dispersed. And so it was like, it was in the rear view in the sense that I didn't think I'd have another chance to do the show, but having it there again and presenting it to their team and getting to talk to it with Barbara, who's my former professor, and getting to sort of like talk through it, like I really got a chance to process it even like in a more kind of like thorough way. And so I feel like I became more confident in that, like that kind of like, it's a question, it's an opening, it's sort of like, it's meant to be this experience to kind of open you up to think about the proposals that are offered by each of these artists. And it was an opportunity for me to deepen my relationship with each of the artists. The works from Tim and Erica didn't change, but we got a different work for Betty, and so there was sort of like a new configuration that happened. And so, maybe I'm talking around it and maybe I should just be more direct, but it's like, I just got to talk about it more. And so it helped me think about the show differently and understand it better myself. And I think I also got better at talking about it, which I'm not going into specifics because I assume that now that it's been like 3 years, no one's seen the show. So I don't need to do that. But just to say, like, it helped me understand more what I was doing. Which of course every curator knows exactly what they're doing as soon as they start out. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity, and I'm grateful that this was an important show. Like I sort of don't want to underemphasize the fact that like Betty Saar is not known well in Canada. Like she doesn't have a profile here. She doesn't have any work in collections here. She was shown once at Walter Phillips in the 90s. Like, it's just like, it was important that her work circulate more. And so like, I was really honored to be able to be part of that in a small way. And like, yeah, just, from a practical standpoint, getting to do that was important to me.
Can I share a feeling? Oh, this is really good timing. Walking into the show in Winnipeg, It was in February. It was really cold. And like there's this like pocketed window when you walk into the gallery. It's like the first set of doors, and then there's like the lobby area, and then the second set of doors. And this is what you see, which is amazing. Like it feels, I just remember, I grew up Christian, and so this like imagery feels very like, it's odd because you actually never see this. You see the other side of the pulpit when you're at a church. And I feel like when I walked into the show in Winnipeg, yeah, I think the like sentiment of like what you're speaking to in terms of like staging and like responding to space like was just like I was like, this is the thesis. Like I just feel it was like very held by your curatorial vision and like the space that you were trying to cultivate for people to think about the work.
Thanks.
Just like to come from the cold and then just be in this like I don't know. It was I don't know if I've told you that before. I guess I'm telling you on stage, but yeah, I think it really spoke to like the sentiment of like what you've been
Yeah.
carrying towards.
Thank you. That's really kind.
I think one of the things that I found like interesting about the methodology of your show, Shalaka, was the way you kind of like there's sometimes a kind of binary between like work in the show and sort of like auxiliary programming, as in like performances or artist talks and stuff like that. And I found in your show there was this idea of like the space for performance was always left in that exhibition.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering how you think about that binary between like exhibition work and like programming, and how you kind of like transgressed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've mentioned I was trained as a planner, and so my entry point into curatorial work kind of came through the disciplinary switch that I made through school. And I think that probably is why I'm so interested in programming as a really intentional part of my practice, because programming is how I gave myself permission to enter into gallery spaces, whether it was an artist talk or a performance. Like those were the ways that I was able to understand maybe a curator's voice, or maybe it was the gallery's voice, or just, I don't know, everyone does it a little bit differently, but programming to me allows like that space that sometimes when you're in a show, the not knowingness can kind of feel overwhelming. As someone, I'm just thinking a few years back now, prior to study and practice. And it's also probably like highly informed by the fact that no one in my family works in the arts. And so I'm always thinking about what are the sort of like portals we can poke. So maybe the show feels intimidating to go to, but maybe a performance feels a little bit more approachable. And so what are these ways when artistic practice is sort of being designed out of public life in so many ways, like what are the ways that we can invite people back? And I think programming seems to be one of those threads for me. And so in designing the sort of exhibition layout, I really liked this idea of there being this like nook where performance happened over and over. And so on opening night, we had this impossibly full tank of water in the gallery, like meters away from the vault, which like I'm so grateful I was able to have.
Thanks, Brooks.
Happen. Yeah, it crushed it, and I was very grateful. But it created this sort of like first stage, and then sort of closer to the, and that performance was by Natalia Villanueva Linares, plus 8 students from the U of M, or I guess from the U of M community. And then closer to closing week, we had Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse also perform in that nook. And it happens to be that their works are next to each other in the way that the exhibition was laid out. And I think, I feel embarrassed at how much I'm pulling from like nature metaphors, but I'm thinking about going to parks and seeing this sort of like natural like amphitheater, or this like opening, or like just this intention of like maybe if we curve this slightly, something could happen here. And I think I was trying to apply that methodology a little bit to the show. Like, what if we just create this like little pocket? Like, what could we seed there? Ha, squeezed it in. And I think for me that comes, so I kind of talked a little bit about my training as a planner and sort of feeling a little bit on the periphery of the arts prior to like entering it more formally, but also as someone who doesn't drive, walking and biking are the ways that I move through the world. And so when you're walking and biking, there's a different pace that you're moving through the world. And I think that slowness allows that sort of attunement of like, oh, that's an interesting nook. Like what happens there after the sun goes down? Or like looking for these spaces, I think is something that I've always practiced. And so I think it's translating a little bit into exhibition design for me. Yeah.
Well, it's 8 o'clock. And I think we'll leave it there for the moment and know that there's a reception happening in the lobby. Books are available, and just wanted to thank you all for being here and for sharing with us. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.